Most golfers panic when they get into a bunker. But what if I told you that a bunker shot can be one of the easiest shots in golf if you know the right technique? In this video, I'm going to show you how to get out of the bunker every single time and even help you start to get up and down more often. Okay, so the first key is going to be playing the ball position right in the middle of your stance. If you have a tendency to catch the ball first and blade the ball over, you can play the ball a little bit more forward in your stance, about 1/3 up in your stance. But for most people, I have found that actually just a straight middle ball position works for most people. From here also, we're going to set up with a more wider stance, and we're going to want to go ahead and squat down. What's great about squatting down is that when you squat down, it also lowers the handle. So as you can see, when I squat down, my handle gets a little bit lower, which then allows me to really expose more of that bounce. What is bounce exactly? If you look closely at this club here, you can see how the back edge is lower than the front edge, creating this angle coming down. And what's great about this back edge being exposed when you hit the shot is that it glides through the sand so much easier when that bounce is exposed. So getting that shaft to be a little bit lower down like this exposes that bounce to be a little bit lower than the front edge. So we're going to want to get that nice squat to get the handle down. And then when we set up to this ball, what I want you to do is I want you to twist the face open. So notice how I twist the face. I twist the face open first, and then I take my grip. So I'm twisting the face open and then taking my grip. When I address the ball, I want the shaft to be very, very neutral. No leaning of the shaft forward here. So I want you to really set up with the shaft neutral where the butt end of the club is pointing right at our belly button. Now, a great drill to do this with is to actually draw a line in the sand on each side of the ball. Okay, so you can see I have a line leading up to the ball, then I leave the ball in a pretty decent lie, then I draw another line over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple of practice strokes actually on the line first. And what I'm looking to do here is that when I get into my good setup position, I'm taking a full swing going back and then taking a divot. And ideally, what we want to see is there's a divot in the ground where there's half the divot on one side and half the divot on the other. So as you can see, there's a divot on each side of the line, about half on one side and half on the other. The type of divots that we want to avoid is a divot that looks like this, where I have my divot too far back. Behind the line is too far back, and we don't want that. We don't want to see the divot too far forward. That's kind of going to be catching the ball first and the ball will sail over. This one back here will typically leave the ball in the bunker. And then one of the worst divots that you can ever have looks like this. And as you can see, I did not hit the ground at all. So recapping the divot again, we want to see this divot here where there's half the divot on one side, half the divot on the other. If we get a divot that's too far behind the line, that's no good, because that's going to be keeping the ball into the bunker. And then we don't want the divot too far forward where the divot starts on the line, because that's going to be catching the ball first and then sailing the ball over the green. You're going to want to do practice swings until you can get that divot half on one side and half on the other pretty regularly. You're going to want to do practice swings until you can get 5 in a row where you can get half the divot on one side and half the divot on the other. What makes this shot easy is that we're not actually even hitting the ball. All we're really doing is just clearing sand on one side of the line and the other side of the line. And if you can do that consistently, the ball comes out really, really easy. So use this line to help you take your practice swings and get it until you can take 5 in a row where you're making that divot on half the one side and half on the other. Once you can do 5 in a row, go ahead and then try the ball. Every time you hit a ball, though, I do want there to be a line on one side of the ball and one on the other side of the ball when you're hitting your shot. So that way, after you hit your shot, you can have visual evidence of where your divot was after you've hit the shot. I'm going to go ahead and hit this shot, and let's take a look at how it went. So on that divot, you can see how I do have divot on each side of the line. If I had to be a little extra critical of that shot, you can see how there's maybe a little extra divot too far behind the line. If I could get the back of this edge of this divot just a little bit closer to the line, that would have been maybe a little bit more of a successful shot. But overall, it was decent because I did have some divot half on one side and then a little bit on the other side as well. So understanding these divots are going to be helpful, and you practicing these divots is going to be crucial. If you've ever left a ball in the bunker or bladed it over the green, you're not alone. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's the worst bunker shot you've ever hit? Let's see who has the funniest or most painful story.